After years of brutal conflict, something is shifting in the war in Ukraine. For the first time in what feels like forever, there are quiet, secret signs that the first real steps toward peace might finally be happening. So let's break down what's going on behind the scenes.
And this is the big question, isn't it? Is a secret deal actually in the works? I mean, for the first time in a very long time, high-level, hush-hush diplomacy is back on the table. So in this explainer, we're going to dig into what's happening, why it's happening right now, and what it could mean for the future of Europe.
And there it is. This is the bombshell that really changes the game. A secret meeting between American and Russian officials, held in a neutral country, completely off the public's radar. Look, this isn't your typical press conference. This is the kind of quiet, serious diplomacy that can actually, maybe, lead to a real breakthrough. Okay, so what do these secret talks really mean? Let's unpack the details of these clandestine meetings and try to figure out why this moment feels, well, different. Now, what you've got to appreciate here is just how fast all of this happened. We're talking about a flurry of activity over just a couple of days. First, you have the US and Ukraine getting on the same page in Geneva. Then, boom, just hours later, a top US official is secretly meeting with the Russians. And get this, it wasn't just a one-off. They scheduled a second meeting almost immediately. That signals real momentum. So, why Abu Dhabi? Well, this is textbook back-channel diplomacy. The UAE is seen as a neutral player, one that's trusted by both Washington and Moscow. Holding talks there lets both sides float really sensitive ideas without the glare of media cameras or the public pressure that forces leaders to take a hardline stance. It's basically a safe space to see if a deal is even possible. Which brings us to the crucial question. After years of fighting, why this big push for peace right now? What's changed? Well, the hard reality is that everybody is feeling the squeeze. The front lines have become a brutal, bloody stalemate. Ukraine is running dangerously low on ammunition, and you can feel the political fatigue setting in among its Western allies. At the same time, Russia's economy is really feeling the long-term sting of sanctions. Essentially, the brutal cost of war has finally created conditions where talking might be better than fighting. And for the US, especially under President Trump, the motivations are crystal clear. First, the economy. Ending the war would help bring down oil prices and stabilize global markets. Second, a huge one, is geopolitics. Washington is really eager to pivot its resources and attention to its main long-term competitor, China. And third, you've got domestic politics. There's a strong push to cut back on overseas spending. You put those three together, and you have a powerful incentive for the US to get a deal done. But, even with all this momentum, you still have the massive core conflict. What do Russia and Ukraine actually want? And is there any way those demands can ever be reconciled? And wow, this really just lays it all out, doesn't it? On one side, Russia wants the land it's taken to be recognized as Russian, and it wants a permanent guarantee that Ukraine will never, ever join NATO. On the other side, Ukraine wants every inch of its territory back, including Crimea, plus ironclad security guarantees and justice for war crimes. The gap between these two positions is just immense. So how on earth do you bridge a gap that wide? And that question leads us right here to the major roadblocks and what a realistic peace deal might actually look like in the real world. Yeah, the path to peace is, well, it's an absolute minefield. Territory is number one. It's the emotional, political heart of this entire conflict. But then you also have the NATO question, a massive trust deficit after years of broken promises. And the simple fact that both leaders have to sell any deal back home, a deal that looks like a surrender could be political suicide. So with all those roadblocks, you have to wonder, what could peace actually look like? What are the realistic scenarios being kicked around behind the scenes? Well, analysts have pretty much boiled it down to three main possibilities. A full Russian withdrawal, that's seen as very, very low likelihood. A territorial compromise where Ukraine gives up some land, it's medium but incredibly painful and difficult to imagine. Which leaves the most likely scenario, freezing the front line. Think of it like the Korean War armistice. A ceasefire stops the fighting, but there's no formal peace treaty. The big questions about territory are just kicked down the road. So if a frozen conflict is the most likely outcome, how do you even get there? Well, this is a potential roadmap. It would start with an immediate monitored ceasefire and demilitarized zones. Then, crucially, you have this idea of a NATO freeze, which would give Ukraine strong security guarantees without full immediate membership. It's a compromise. And notice step 5, Postpone the final talks on territory. It's a pragmatic approach designed to just stop the bleeding first and tackle the hardest problems later.
Okay, so let's zoom out for a second, because this isn't just about Ukraine and Russia, right? The outcome of these talks has massive implications for, well, for everybody.
And this shows just how many major players have a real stake in seeing peace. For Europe, it's about ending the refugee crisis and getting trade back on track. For Russia, it's all about sanction relief and economic survival. And for a rising power like India, it means cheaper energy and a more stable supply of military hardware. You see, everyone has something pretty significant to gain from ending this war. So with so much on the line, you gotta ask, are these talks for real this time, or is this just another false dawn? Well, analysts are pointing to seven key indicators that suggest this time might actually be different. So let's just run through the evidence one more time. You've got the secret US-Russia meetings. You've got active US-Ukraine consultations to align their goals. You have a US president who is personally invested in making a deal. You add to that the stalemate on the battlefield, the growing economic pain in Russia, and increased pressure from Europe, and you can see all these factors are pushing in the same direction, toward a negotiation. And I think this quote just nails it. Nobody expects a peace treaty to be signed tomorrow. The obstacles are just gigantic. But the key takeaway here is that after a very long, very dark period, real, meaningful diplomacy is finally actually happening again. Which leaves us with the final nagging question. Is this the beginning of the end of Europe's deadliest conflict in generations? Or is it just another false hope on a long, tragic road? The secret talks in Abu Dhabi have definitely opened a door. But whether anyone is truly ready to walk through it, well, that remains to be seen.